Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting into the shadowed corridors of cinema, where animatronic mysteries refuse to rest, where every frame holds secrets that whisper questions rather than answers. The Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie arrived in theaters on December 5th, 2025, and like its predecessor, it didn't just tell a story. It wove a web of hidden details, cryptic references, and lingering enigmas that have left the community buzzing with theories and speculation. But tonight, we're not here to celebrate what we know. We're here to explore what remains unexplained, those Easter eggs that flicker in the darkness like Charlotte's music box, present but not fully understood, seen but not yet deciphered. The movie itself performed remarkably at the box office, opening with $63 million in its first weekend and becoming the biggest horror release of the year. Critics may have been harsh, with many calling it overstuffed and convoluted, but for those who've spent years dissecting Scott Cawthon's intricate lore, this sequel was a treasure trove of references, callbacks, and new mysteries. Emma Tammy returned to direct, but this time, Scott Cawthon wrote the screenplay solo. Without the collaborative efforts that shaped the first film, this means every detail, every frame, every cryptic moment likely carries intentional weight, seeded deliberately into the narrative for fans to discover and decode. What makes this movie particularly fascinating for our purposes tonight is that it doesn't just reference the games. It diverges from them, creating its own cinematic universe while simultaneously nodding to established lore in ways that raise more questions than they answer. Some Easter eggs feel like confirmations of long-held theories. Others feel like new riddles wrapped in familiar packaging. And then there are those moments, those brief flashes and subtle inclusions that leave us wondering not just what they mean for the movie story, but what they might reveal about the larger Five Nights at Freddy's mythos that has captivated millions since 2014. The film takes place in 2002, 1 year after the events of the first movie. Mike and Abby Schmidt are attempting to return to normal life, while Vanessa struggles with the revelation that her father, William Afton, was a serial killer responsible for the missing children incident. When a group of paranormal investigators called the Spectral Scoopers breaks into the original 1982 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, they inadvertently release Charlotte Emily's vengeful spirit from the marionette, setting into motion a series of events that brings the toy animatronics into the real world and forces our protagonist to confront horrors they thought they'd left behind. But woven throughout this narrative are details that don't quite fit. Appearances by characters who shouldn't be there. References to events that haven't been explained. Connections to lore that exists in the games but hasn't been established in this cinematic universe. These are the mysteries we'll be exploring tonight, each one a thread that leads into darkness rather than light, each one an unanswered question that keeps the community theorizing long after the credits have rolled. Before we descend into these shadows together, I want to acknowledge something important. This movie was made for fans. It's packed with references that reward those who've spent countless hours analyzing minigames, studying voice lines, and connecting dots across multiple games and books. If you're new to Five Nights at Freddy's lore, some of what we discuss tonight might feel overwhelming. That's okay. Let it wash over you like that gentle fog the crying child once knew. And perhaps by the end, you'll have a better sense of why this franchise has inspired such passionate dedication from its community. Whether you're rewatching scenes frame by frame, searching for answers we'll discuss tonight, or simply letting this analysis drift you towards sleep, while your mind works through possibilities in dreams. Know that you're part of something special. You're part of a community that refuses to let mysteries rest, that finds meaning in shadows and significance in silence. So settle in, adjust your volume, and let's explore together every hidden Easter egg in the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie that still doesn't have an answer. The Shadow Bonnie Enigma, a fleeting glimpse of agony. Let's begin with one of the most talked about Easter eggs in the entire movie, a moment so brief that many viewers missed it entirely on their first watch. A flash of darkness that appeared for mere frames but sent longtime fans into absolute pandemonium. I'm talking, of course, about Shadow Bonnie's appearance in the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. A cameo that raises far more questions than it could possibly answer in the fraction of a second it occupies on screen. The scene unfolds roughly midway through the film. Mike has entered the original pizzeria location, the one from 1982, where Charlotte died, and where the spirit of the marionette has been trapped for 20 years. He's searching for Abby, navigating through dark corridors with only his flashlight to pierce the gloom. The tension is palpable, the silence broken only by his footsteps and the distant creaking of old machinery. He sweeps his flashlight down what appears to be an empty hallway, the beam cutting through darkness to reveal dilapidated walls covered in faded children's drawings and peeling paint. And then, for perhaps 3 or 4 frames, it's there. Shadow Bonnie, standing in the hallway, a pitch-black silhouette in the shape of Toy Bonnie, with glowing white eyes and teeth that form a too-wide grin. The figure is completely motionless, not approaching, not retreating, simply existing in that space as Mike's light passes over it. And then it's gone, vanished so quickly that Mike himself doesn't seem to consciously register its presence. He continues forward, oblivious to what the camera has just revealed to us, but not to him. The theater erupted when fans caught this moment. Social media exploded with posts from viewers confirming they'd seen it, comparing notes about the exact timestamp, sharing screenshots that captured those precious frames. Some people went back into theaters multiple times just to verify what they thought they'd glimpsed. And the confirmation was both thrilling and deeply unsettling. Yes, Shadow Bonnie, also known as RWQFSFASXC, or simply RXQ, had made a cameo in the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie. But what does it mean? Why is it there? And most importantly, what is Shadow Bonnie in this cinematic universe? To understand why this appearance is so significant and so mysterious, we need to discuss what Shadow Bonnie represents in the games. First appearing as a rare Easter egg in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Shadow Bonnie would occasionally manifest in the office, crashing the game if you looked at it too long. It wasn't an animatronic in the traditional sense. It had no physical form, no endoskeleton, no suit. It was a dark, ghostly apparition, and its origins have been debated by the community for years. Within the fan community, there are various interpretations of what Shadow Bonnie might represent. Some players have theorized it could be connected to someone who died in a springlock failure, while the Fazbear Frights book series suggests entities like Shadow Bonnie might be associated with concentrated agony and suffering. However, none of these theories have been confirmed by official sources, and the entity remains one of the franchise's most enigmatic elements. But here's what makes its appearance in the movie so puzzling. The film hasn't established any of this context. There's been no mention of springlock failures beyond William's eventual fate in the first movie. There's been no discussion of agony as a tangible force. Shadow Bonnie simply appears, exists for a moment, and vanishes. It's not acknowledged by any character. It doesn't interact with the plot. It's there and then it's not, like a ghost in the most literal sense. So what is it doing in the movie? Is it a harbinger, a warning, a symptom of something darker lurking beneath the surface of this location? The pizzeria from 1982 is where Charlotte died, where her spirit fused with the marionette. It's where William Afton attempted to murder a child before Charlotte intervened. It's a place soaked in trauma, in violence, in the kind of suffering that might, according to the lore established in other FNaF media, create entities like Shadow Bonnie. But the movie doesn't explain this. It doesn't give us any context for understanding what we've just seen. For fans familiar with the games, it's a thrilling reference, a confirmation that these shadow entities exist in some form in the cinematic universe. For everyone else, it's a barely perceptible flicker of something wrong, a subliminal cue that this place harbors horrors beyond the animatronics we can see and understand. What's particularly intriguing is how Shadow Bonnie appears. It doesn't move. It doesn't jump scare Mike. It simply exists in that space, almost as if it's always been there, invisible until the light hits it at precisely the right angle, revealing something that was present all along. This suggests that Shadow Bonnie isn't actively hunting or threatening anyone. It's more like a stain, a mark left behind by something terrible that happened here. The question that haunts fans is whether this appearance means anything for future films. Is Shadow Bonnie being seeded now for a larger role later? Will we learn more about what it is and why it's here? Or is this simply Scott Cawthon's way of acknowledging that yes, shadow entities exist in this universe, even if we're not ready to fully explore them yet? Consider also the timing of its appearance. Mike is alone, vulnerable, searching for his sister in a place he knows is dangerous. He's in the exact kind of emotional and physical state that, according to some theories, might make him more susceptible to perceiving these kinds of entities. But he doesn't see it. Only we, the audience, see it. This raises fascinating questions about the nature of Shadow Bonnie in the movie's reality. Is it something that exists objectively? Or is it more like a phenomenon that can only be perceived under certain conditions? In the games, encountering Shadow Bonnie often results in the game crashing, as if its mere presence is too much for the system to handle, as if it's a glitch in reality itself. The movie can't replicate this exact experience, but it does something similar by making Shadow Bonnie's appearance so brief, so fleeting, that it barely registers. It's there and gone so fast it might as well not have been there at all. Viewers question whether they really saw it. They doubt their own perception. In a way, this is more unsettling than a traditional jump scare, because it makes us question what's real. Some fans have theorized that Shadow Bonnie's presence might be connected to the mini marionettes we see later in the film, those smaller versions of the puppet that attack one of the Spectral Scoopers members. Could these shadow entities and these corrupted versions of animatronics all be manifestations of the same force, expressions of the concentrated agony that permeates locations where terrible things have happened? The movie doesn't answer this. It doesn't even acknowledge the question. Shadow Bonnie appears, and then the story moves on. What we're left with is a mystery that feels deliberately planted. Scott Cawthon wrote this screenplay alone, which means he had complete control over what made it into the final film. He could have cut Shadow Bonnie. He could have made it more prominent. Instead, he chose to include it in this incredibly subtle way, visible only to those who are paying very close attention, acknowledged by absolutely no one in the movie's reality. This is vintage Five Nights at Freddy's storytelling. Scott has always favoured the subtle over the obvious, the implied over the explicit. He creates mysteries by showing us just enough to know something is there, but never enough to fully understand what we're looking at. Shadow Bonnie's appearance in the FNaF 2 movie is a perfect example of this philosophy. It's there. It's real within the movie's universe. But what it means, where it came from, and whether it will return, remains completely unexplained. As we move forward through this analysis, keep Shadow Bonnie in the back of your mind. This fleeting glimpse might be our first indication that the Five Nights at Freddy's cinematic universe contains more than just haunted animatronics and vengeful spirits. It might contain something older, something more fundamental, something born from suffering itself. But for now, it remains one of the movie's most tantalizing unsolved mysteries. A shadow within shadows, a question mark glowing white in the darkness. The Circus Baby mystery. Green eyes in the dark deep within Vanessa's dream sequence. Hidden in shadows where she confronts memories of her father's crimes. There's a moment that sends chills down the spine of anyone familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. As Vanessa arranges items from William Afton's trophy box, preparing to enter her dream state using the same techniques Mike employed in the first film. The camera pans across the room, and there, partially visible in the dim light, sits an animatronic that shouldn't be there, that hasn't been explained, that raises questions about events that may have happened off-screen in this cinematic universe. I'm talking about Circus Baby, and more specifically, about her eyes. Let's set the scene precisely. Vanessa is in what appears to be a basement or storage area, surrounded by William Afton's creations and trophies. She's preparing to confront her father in the dream realm, using static on a television and various objects to focus her mind. The atmosphere is heavy with dread, with the weight of knowing these items once belonged to murdered children. And then, as the camera sweeps through the space, we see her. Circus Baby, the clown animatronic with the distinctive red pigtails, white face, and most importantly, glowing green eyes. For fans of the games, this is an immediately recognizable design, pulled straight from Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. But it's not just that Circus Baby appears. It's how she appears and what her appearance implies. Because in sister location's lore, Circus Baby's eyes tell a very specific story. She was originally built with blue eyes. They only turned green after William Afton's daughter Elizabeth was killed by the animatronic's malfunctioning claw mechanism, and her spirit possessed the suit. The green eyes are Elizabeth's eyes, a marker of possession, proof that a human soul has merged with the machine. In the movie, Circus Baby already has green eyes. This isn't a case of the filmmakers simply choosing a color that looked good or matched the character's most recognizable appearance. In the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, these kinds of details are rarely accidental, especially in a film written entirely by Scott Cawthon, who has spent over a decade carefully constructing this lore. If Circus Baby has green eyes in the movie, it strongly suggests that Elizabeth has already been killed, that she has already possessed this animatronic, that somewhere in the history of the cinematic universe, another Afton child has died in exactly the way she does in the games. But here's where the mystery deepens into something truly puzzling. The movie never mentions Elizabeth. Not once. Vanessa is established as William Afton's daughter, but there's no reference to any other children beyond the newly introduced Michael Afton. The photos in William's home show only 2 children, presumably Vanessa and Michael. There's no indication that Elizabeth exists in this continuity at all. And yet, here's Circus Baby with green eyes, which in the games only turned green after Elizabeth possessed the suit. This has led fans to wonder whether Elizabeth exists in this universe at all, or if Vanessa might somehow be connected to this name. However, since Vanessa is clearly alive and adult, this doesn't align with what we know from the games about Elizabeth dying young. The green eyes could suggest a different victim entirely, someone we haven't been introduced to yet. What makes this particularly intriguing is that in the games, Circus Baby was originally built with blue eyes that only turned green after possession. The fact that the movie shows her with green eyes from the start suggests something has already happened, some event that parallels Elizabeth's fate in the games but hasn't been explained in this cinematic universe. Based on game lore, this could imply William had been experimenting with possession even earlier than we realized, potentially before the missing children incident we know about. This theory finds support in the timing of Charlotte's death. The movie establishes that Charlotte was killed in 1982 at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. William is already wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, already attempting to lure children to their deaths, which means he's already embarked on his path of murder. But what set him on that path? In the games, many fans believe the death of his son in the bite of 83 is what breaks William psychologically and starts him killing. But in the movie, we haven't seen that event, and there's been no mention of a crying child or a bite incident involving William's family. Could Elizabeth's death be the inciting incident in the movie's timeline? Could Circus Baby's creation and malfunction have been the catalyst that transformed William from an ambitious but ultimately harmless robotics engineer into a serial killer? The green eyes suggest something happened. They suggest a story that unfolded off-screen, before the events of the first movie, a tragedy that shaped William's psychology and methodology. But again, the movie doesn't explain this. Circus Baby appears for perhaps 5 seconds of screen time. Her eyes glow green, establishing that, yes, someone's spirit inhabits this animatronic. And then the scene moves on. Vanessa doesn't interact with her. There's no dialogue explaining her presence. She's simply there, another one of William's creations stored in this space, another tool he designed for purposes the movie leaves us to imagine. What makes this particularly frustrating is how crucial Circus Baby is to the larger Five Nights at Freddy's lore. In Sister Location, she's the main antagonist, the primary threat, and the vehicle through which we learn about William's experiments with Remnant and his attempts to achieve immortality through animatronic possession. The entire plot of Sister Location revolves around her and the other Funtime animatronics. To include her in the movie, even briefly, even as just a background detail, suggests that this story exists in some form in the cinematic universe. The placement of this Easter egg is also significant. It occurs during Vanessa's dream sequence, a moment when she's confronting her father and the legacy of his crimes. She's literally surrounded by his creations, by the evidence of his evil. That Circus Baby is among these creations implies she's another example of William's work, another machine built for dark purposes. But without context, without explanation, we're left to wonder what those purposes were and whether they were ever fulfilled. Some fans have pointed out that Circus Baby's design in the movie appears to be a complete, finished animatronic, not a prototype or a damaged version. This suggests she was actually used for something, that she served whatever function William designed her for. In Sister Location, Circus Baby was the centerpiece of Circus Baby's Pizza World, a separate location from the Freddy Fazbear's restaurants. Could this location exist in the movie's universe? Have we simply not seen it yet? Or has it already come and gone? Another failed venture in Williams' history of building restaurants that became crime scenes. The green eyes stare out from the shadows, luminous and somehow aware. For that brief moment when the camera captures them, it feels as if Circus Baby is watching Vanessa, as if whatever spirit inhabits the animatronic recognizes something in this woman who shares a father with the girl who died inside the suit. It's a haunting image, made more powerful by how little we understand about what we're seeing. Here's what we know for certain. Circus Baby exists in the movie's universe. She has green eyes, which in the game's lore indicates possession. William Afton created her, which means at some point he had the resources, knowledge, and motivation to build this particular animatronic. And she's stored in a location that appears to be connected to Afton's personal space, suggesting she wasn't just a commercial creation, but something more private, more personal. Here's what we don't know, and what the movie refuses to tell us. Who possesses Circus Baby? If it's Elizabeth, when did she die, and under what circumstances? If it's someone else, who are they, and how did they end up in this animatronic? What purpose did William design Circus Baby to serve? Was she meant to be an entertainment animatronic, or did she have a darker function from the start? Did Circus Baby's Pizza World exist in this timeline? If so, what happened to it? These questions hang in the air like Charlotte's music box melody, present but unanswered, significant but unexplained. The green eyes gleam in the darkness, and we're left to wonder whether this brief appearance is a promise of stories yet to be told, or simply a nod to fans who wanted to see one of the franchise's most iconic animatronics represented on screen, even if her story remains untold in this continuity. As we move forward through this analysis, remember those green eyes. Remember that glow in the shadows. Because if there's one thing Five Nights at Freddy's has taught us over the years, it's that nothing is included without purpose. Circus Baby is here for a reason. We just don't know what that reason is yet. And perhaps that's exactly how Scott Cawthon wants it, leaving us to theorize, to wonder, and to wait for answers that may come in future installments, or may remain forever mysterious. Another secret buried in William Afton's dark legacy, Charlotte's unexplained connection to the marionette. Perhaps the most baffling mystery in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie occurs in its opening minutes, before the title card appears, before we even understand who Charlotte Emily is or what role she'll play in the story. It's a single line of dialogue, delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty that it's easy to miss how deeply strange it is, how completely unexplained it remains despite being absolutely crucial to understanding Charlotte's fate and the marionette's nature. The scene takes place in 1982, at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, during what appears to be a busy party day. Children run through the restaurant, playing games, eating pizza, celebrating birthdays in the chaotic way kids do when they're overstimulated and oversugared. Among them is Charlotte Emily, a lonely girl who doesn't quite fit in with the other children. She sits by herself, watching rather than participating, observing the festivities from a distance that's emotional as much as physical. Young Vanessa, who is at the party with her father William, approaches Charlotte with a Faz Cola. It's a kind gesture, an attempt at friendship from one child to another. Charlotte accepts the drink, takes a sip, and makes a face. "It tastes like gasoline," she says. which is both funny and ominous. One of those little details that will stick with you when you remember what happens to her later. But it's what Charlotte says next that stops the conversation cold, that introduces the mystery we're still trying to unravel. Charlotte tells Vanessa that she feels connected to the marionette. Not that she likes it, not that it's her favorite animatronic, but that she feels a connection to it. This is phrased as something Charlotte has been feeling for a while, an ongoing sensation or recognition that predates this conversation. She says it with the certainty of someone describing a fact about themselves, like having a favorite color or preferring one food over another. This isn't a passing comment. This is Charlotte revealing something fundamental about her relationship to this particular animatronic. And here's why this is so profoundly strange. At this point in the timeline, Charlotte is still alive. She hasn't died yet. Her soul hasn't fused with the marionette. That won't happen until later this same day, when she tries to save a boy from William Afton and gets stabbed for her heroism. The marionette is currently just a machine, an animatronic designed to hand out gifts and entertain children, nothing more. There's no reason for Charlotte to feel any special connection to it. There's no reason for it to feel connected to her, unless something much stranger is going on. In the games, Charlotte's death and subsequent possession of the marionette is presented as a tragic accident, a convergence of circumstances that results in a spirit finding a vessel. She's locked out of the restaurant. William kills her, and her soul, in its desperate search for refuge, or perhaps drawn by some instinctual force, merges with the nearby animatronic. It's portrayed as something that happens to her, not something she was destined for or somehow prepared for. But the movie suggests something different. It suggests that Charlotte and the marionette were always meant to be connected, that this union was somehow inevitable, that there was a bond between this specific girl and this specific animatronic before death ever entered the equation. This fundamentally changes our understanding of possession in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. It implies that souls don't just randomly inhabit whatever animatronic is nearby when they die. It suggests there might be something more intentional, more destined, about which spirits end up in which machines. What could explain this connection? The movie offers no answers, leaving fans to develop their own interpretations. One possibility worth considering draws from what we know about Henry Emily in the games. As Charlotte's father and the more technically skilled of Fazbear Entertainment's founders, he would have been responsible for much of the marionette's design. If he built this particular animatronic with his daughter in mind, perhaps as a guardian figure for children at the restaurant, Charlotte might have felt drawn to it through familiarity or through time spent watching him work on it. This interpretation finds some support in how the marionette functions throughout the franchise. In the games, it's portrayed as a protective entity that gives gifts and gives life, helping other spirits find vessels. This protective nature could reflect Henry's original intention for the design. From this perspective, Charlotte's feeling of connection might simply be a child recognizing something her father created with care and purpose. Another angle to consider is that Charlotte's statement might be less mystical than it sounds. Children often form attachments to specific toys or characters without fully understanding why. Charlotte saying she feels connected to the marionette could be similar to any child having a favorite animatronic. What makes it seem prophetic is only that she later ends up possessing it after her death, creating a narrative weight the original statement didn't necessarily carry. However, some fans have noted a darker possibility worth mentioning, though this ventures into pure speculation. Given William Afton's later experiments with possession and his apparent jealousy of Henry's success, viewers have wondered if William might have tampered with the marionette somehow, preparing it for his experiments. In this reading, Charlotte's sensitivity to the connection could indicate she sensed something was wrong with the machine, making her later possession even more tragic. This would reframe her attempt to save the boy not just as heroism, but as acting on an instinct that something dangerous was happening with these animatronics. It's worth emphasizing that the movie never confirms any of these interpretations. Charlotte states she feels connected to the marionette, and then later possesses it. Whether this represents destiny, coincidence, or something more sinister is left entirely to viewer interpretation. The movie gives us no indication which, if any, of these theories is correct. Charlotte says she feels connected to the marionette, and then hours later, her dying body falls into its arms and her soul fuses with it. The connection she felt becomes literal, becomes permanent, becomes the defining fact of her existence for the next 20 years. The marionette rises from its box holding Charlotte's corpse, its black tears marking its face in what looks like grief or perhaps acceptance of the burden it's been given. What's particularly frustrating about this mystery is that it feels like information the movie should have given us. Charlotte's pre-existing connection to the marionette isn't a background detail or a subtle Easter egg. It's stated explicitly in dialogue. Vanessa hears it. The audience hears it. It's presented as important, as meaningful. And then it's never explained, never explored, never referenced again. We're simply expected to accept that Charlotte felt connected to this animatronic, that her feeling proved prophetic, and that whatever bond existed between them before her death was transformed into something far more terrible and permanent after it. Some fans have suggested that this unexplained connection might be a setup for future films, that we'll learn more about why Charlotte felt this way when we explore Henry Emily's backstory and his relationship with William Afton. Skeet Ulrich appears only briefly as Henry in this movie, showing up at the end in the present day to warn Mike about Charlotte's vengeful possession of Vanessa. But his limited screen time suggests there's much more to his story that hasn't been told yet. Mysteries about his partnership with William, about the technology they created together, about what he knew and when he knew it. If a third film explores the origins of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, if it shows us Henry and William's early days as business partners and friends before everything went wrong, we might finally get answers about the marionette's construction and Charlotte's mysterious connection to it. We might learn that Henry built the marionette with his daughter specifically in mind, that he incorporated something into its design that made it uniquely hers. Or we might learn something even stranger, something that fundamentally changes how we understand the technology and spirituality of this universe. Until then, we're left with a mystery that feels almost cruel in its lack of resolution. Charlotte knew something was coming. She felt a connection to the machine that would become her prison. She sensed something none of the other children sensed, understood something none of them understood. Was it intuition? Destiny? Some quality she possessed, or the marionette possessed that drew them together? The movie poses the question through Charlotte's simple statement of fact, and then it moves on, leaving us in the darkness with nothing but theories and that image of the marionette rising, tears streaming down its face, holding the body of a girl who somehow always knew they were meant to be together. The trophy box, secrets behind the lock, when Vanessa pulls that box from the cupboard, when her fingers trace its familiar contours and she prepares to unlock it. longtime Five Nights at Freddy's fans collectively held their breath. Because this wasn't just any box. This was the box. The one that had taunted the community since the end of Night 7 in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. The locked chest accompanied by the message, "Perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now." For nearly a decade, players had theorized, speculated, and argued about what might be inside that box, with Scott Cawthon remaining characteristically silent about its contents. And now, in the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, we were finally going to get an answer. The box itself looks exactly like the one from the game. Same size, same lock, same sense of dark significance. Vanessa opens it slowly, reverently, in a way that suggests both familiarity and dread. She's done this before, we understand. This isn't the first time she's opened William Afton's trophy box. And as she begins removing items and placing them on the shelf beside her bed, we finally see what the notorious FNaF 4 box contains. A bag of marbles, a mirror, a notebook, and Garrett's toy airplane, the one we recognize from the first movie, the one that belonged to Mike's brother before William Afton kidnapped and presumably killed him. For a moment, it seems like the mystery is solved. The box contains trophies from William Afton's victims, keepsakes he collected from the children he murdered over the years. It's a horrifying reveal, made even more disturbing by the realization that William gave these items to Vanessa when she was young, presenting them as gifts without telling her they'd been taken from dead children. The toy airplane confirms this interpretation. We know William killed Garrett. We know the plane belonged to him. Therefore, the other items must have come from other victims, each one representing a life William stole, a child who never got to grow up. But here's where the mystery deepens, rather than resolves. Because while we know the plane's history, we know absolutely nothing about the other items. Who did the marbles belong to? Was it one of the children from the missing children incident? Was it an earlier victim? Someone who died before William began his pattern of stuffing bodies into animatronics? The movie never tells us. The bag of marbles sits on that shelf, ordinary and innocent looking, but charged with terrible significance, because we know a child who loved playing with them died at William's hands. The mirror raises even stranger questions. It's not a child's toy. It's not something a kid would typically carry around or treasure. It's a hand mirror, the kind an adult might use, simple and practical. So who did it belong to? Did one of the murdered children carry a mirror? That seems unlikely, though not impossible. Or does this mirror represent something else? Someone else? Could it have belonged to William's wife, notably absent from both films and never mentioned in dialogue? Could it represent a victim we haven't even been told about yet? Someone whose death predates the events we've seen? Some fans have theorized that the mirror might be significant because of mirror's symbolic importance in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. In the first movie, the words "It's me" appear on the mirror in the security office when Golden Freddy manifests. Mirrors are portals in a sense, gateways between the living world and whatever realm the spirits inhabit. Could William's trophy mirror serve some purpose beyond being a keepsake? Could it be a tool, an implement in the dark rituals he was performing with his victims? The notebook is perhaps the most tantalizing item, because notebooks inherently contain information. They're not just objects to be looked at or played with. They contain words, drawings, thoughts, secrets. Whose notebook is this? What's written inside it? The camera never shows us the contents, never even shows Vanessa opening it. It's simply placed on the shelf with the other items, its cover closed. its secrets hidden. For fans of the games, the presence of a notebook in William Afton's trophy collection immediately brings to mind the survival logbook from FNaF 4, a canon piece of lore that contained hidden messages and puzzles. Could this notebook be something similar? Could it contain William's notes about his experiments with Remnant and Possession? Could it be a victim's diary, a record of their thoughts and fears before they died? Or could it be something else entirely, a piece of this puzzle that we can't even begin to understand without more context? What's particularly frustrating is that Vanessa handles these items with such familiarity, such ease, which tells us she's looked at them many times before. She knows what they are. She understands their significance. She's presumably opened that notebook, examined that mirror, played with those marbles as a child before learning the truth about where they came from. Vanessa has information we don't have, has seen things we haven't been shown, and the movie never gives us access to her knowledge. The fact that William gave these items to his daughter is its own kind of horror. Imagine being a child, receiving gifts from your father, treasuring them the way children do, only to later discover they were stolen from murdered kids. Imagine handling them, playing with them, not knowing they were trophies from your father's crimes. The psychological impact of this revelation would be devastating, and it adds another layer to Vanessa's trauma, another reason why she struggles so much with her father's legacy. This also tells us something disturbing about William's psychology. In giving these items to Vanessa, he was creating a connection between his daughter and his victims, intertwining the innocent with the horrific in a way that suggests profound psychological disturbance. Was this intentional? Did William understand on some level that he was tainting his daughter's childhood with evidence of his crimes? Or was he so divorced from normal human empathy that he genuinely saw these as just objects, items he possessed that he could give away without considering their significance? The movie hints that William gifted these items to Vanessa when she was young, possibly around the same time Charlotte died in 1982, when Vanessa herself was just a child attending birthday parties at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This timing creates a chilling parallel. While Charlotte was dying, while other children were being murdered, or would soon be murdered, Vanessa was receiving trophies from these crimes as gifts. She was close to the horror without knowing it, her innocent childhood unfolding in the shadow of her father's evil. There's also the question of why William kept a trophy box at all. Serial killers who collect souvenirs from their victims do so for specific psychological reasons. The items serve as reminders of their crimes, allowing them to relive the experience. They're trophies in the most literal sense, proof of conquest, evidence of power over their victims. For William to collect these items suggests a level of pride in his murders, a desire to remember and revisit them. But then he gave some of them away to Vanessa. This complicates our understanding of what the trophies meant to him. If they were purely personal mementos, symbols of his own twisted achievements, why would he part with them? One interpretation is that by giving them to Vanessa, he was creating a different kind of legacy, binding his daughter to his crimes even if she didn't know it. Every time she looked at Garrett's plane or played with those marbles, William knew the truth, even if she didn't. It was a secret shared between him and the objects, a private joke at his daughter's expense. Another interpretation focuses on the specific items he kept versus the ones he gave away. Perhaps William retained the most significant trophies for himself, while giving Vanessa items from victims who meant less to him, or from early crimes before he perfected his methodology. This would make the trophy box we see in the movie just a small sample of William's full collection, with other, more important items hidden elsewhere. If this is true, there could be more boxes, more trophies, more evidence of crimes we haven't even learned about yet. The notebook in particular deserves more consideration. Notebooks are different from toys or personal items because they contain information. They're vessels for thoughts, observations, drawings, or records. Whose notebook was this originally? If it belonged to one of William's victims, what did they write in it? Did they record their fears or suspicions about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza? Did they document strange things they noticed about the animatronics? Or was it just a child's ordinary notebook, filled with homework and doodles, made significant only by the tragedy that befell its owner? There's also the possibility, though unconfirmed, that the notebook might not have belonged to a victim at all. What if William kept a record of his crimes, a written account of his murders and experiments? What if this notebook contains his own thoughts and observations, a serial killer's diary that Vanessa unknowingly kept on her shelf for years? This would explain why she never opened it in front of us, why the camera never shows its contents. Some secrets might be too dark to reveal, even in a film about child murder and possessed animatronics. The marbles raise their own questions. In the early 1980s, marbles were still a common children's toy, the kind of thing a kid might carry in their pockets or collect in bags like the one shown in the movie. But marbles are also numerous. A bag of marbles contains dozens of them. This raises the grim possibility that William didn't take the entire bag from one victim. What if these are a collection? One or two marbles taken from multiple children, assembled into a bag that represents not a single death, but many. This interpretation is dark even by Five Nights at Freddy's standards, but it fits with what we know about William's methodical nature. He's not impulsive. He plans his murders carefully, creates opportunities, covers his tracks. A killer this organized might very well create a collection of small items taken from different victims, each marble a tiny monument to a life he destroyed. The fact that we can't count them in the brief time they're on screen means we can't know how many victims they represent. It could be 5, matching the missing children incident. It could be more. The mirror, meanwhile, remains perhaps the most mysterious item because it's the hardest to imagine belonging to a child. Mirrors in horror have long been associated with reflection, identity, and truth. They show us what's really there, revealing things we might not want to see. For William to keep a mirror as a trophy seems symbolically significant in ways that a toy or even a notebook isn't. Mirrors aren't typically sentimental objects. They're functional, pragmatic. So why would a child have been carrying or possessing a mirror that William could take as a trophy? One possibility is that the mirror didn't come from a child victim at all. The Afton family photos show only 2 children, but William was married. He had a wife who's never mentioned in either film. The mirror could have belonged to her, taken as a trophy after some unspecified tragedy. This would suggest William's crimes extend beyond the children we know about, that there are victims in his past we haven't been introduced to. It would add another layer to his psychological profile, showing him capable of harming those closest to him, not just strangers' children. But this ventures into speculation not supported by the film. What we know for certain is that the mirror exists, that William kept it, that he gave it to Vanessa, and that it's stored with trophies from confirmed murders. Beyond that, we can only theorize about its significance and origin. Perhaps future films will explain it. Perhaps it will remain forever mysterious, one more unanswered question in a franchise built on them. What's particularly notable about how the movie handles the trophy box is its restraint. Lesser horror films would have lingered on each item, shown us flashbacks of how William acquired them, explained in explicit detail the significance of every trophy. Instead, the FNaF 2 movie shows us the box, shows us some of its contents, and trusts us to understand the implications without spelling them out. This restraint makes the horror more effective because it engages our imagination, makes us think about the stories behind these objects, the children they belong to, the moments William took them. This approach also respects the intelligence of the audience. We don't need everything explained. We can infer, deduce, and imagine based on context and our knowledge of how serial killers behave and what these items might represent. The movie gives us enough to understand the basic horror. William collected trophies from his victims and gave them to his daughter, while leaving the specific details open for interpretation and speculation. As we move forward in this franchise, the contents of that trophy box will likely continue to haunt viewers and inspire theories. Each item represents a story we haven't been told, a victim we haven't met, a crime we haven't witnessed. They're pieces of a larger puzzle that the films are assembling slowly, revealing William's full scope of evil gradually, rather than all at once. The trophy box is a promise of more horror to come, more revelations waiting in future installments, more connections between past crimes and present terrors. The marbles, mirror, and notebook remain on that shelf throughout Vanessa's dream sequence. They're visible in the background as she confronts her father, as she struggles with Circus Baby's activation, as she ultimately falls unconscious and becomes possessed by Charlotte. These items, these pieces of the FNaF 4 box mystery, bear silent witness to Vanessa's terror. They're complicit in a way, having been there all along, sitting in her room, ordinary objects charged with extraordinary darkness. What would we learn if we could examine each item closely? If we could open that notebook and read what's written inside? If we could look in that mirror and see if there's anything unusual about it beyond being a mirror? If we could count those marbles and determine if there's a specific number that might correspond to a specific victim or set of victims? The movie tantalizes us with these possibilities, but never delivers on them, never gives us the detailed examination we crave. Here's what we know for certain. The FNaF 4 box contained trophies from William Afton's victims. At least one item, the toy airplane, definitively belonged to Garrett, Mike's brother. William gave these items to Vanessa when she was a child, making her unwittingly complicit in his crimes. The items include marbles, a mirror, a notebook, and at least one toy. Here's what we don't know, and what the movie frustratingly refuses to explain. Who did the marbles belong to? What significance, if any, does the specific type of marbles have? Who did the mirror belong to? And why would William keep a mirror as a trophy? What's written in the notebook, and whose notebook was it originally? Are there more items in the box that we didn't see Vanessa remove? How many victims do these trophies represent in total? These questions matter because they would help us understand the full scope of William's crimes in this cinematic universe. We know he killed Garrett. We know he killed Charlotte. We know he's responsible for the missing children incident, which in the games involves 5 children, but might be different in the movies. But these trophies suggest there might be more victims than we're aware of. Children whose deaths haven't been addressed on screen, whose spirits might be out there somewhere, unaccounted for in the main narrative. The FNaF 4 box mystery was finally opened, and somehow we ended up with more questions than when it was locked. It's a very Five Nights at Freddy's kind of resolution, where answers only lead to deeper mysteries, where solving one puzzle reveals two more hidden beneath it. Those items sit on that shelf, ordinary and terrible, and we're left to imagine the stories behind each one, the children who once owned them, the moment William took them, the years Vanessa spent not knowing what she was really looking at when she handled them. Michael Afton, the brother who came from nowhere. Roughly, halfway through the movie, we're introduced to a character who fundamentally changes the landscape of the Five Nights at Freddy's cinematic universe, while simultaneously creating one of the film's most baffling mysteries. I'm talking about Michael Afton, William's son and Vanessa's brother, a character who appears without warning, without setup, without any indication in the first movie that he might exist. His sudden presence raises profound questions, not just about his role in the story, but about why he was hidden from us until now, and what his true motivations might be. Michael makes his first appearance working as a security guard at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, the one from 1982 where Charlotte died. He's positioned as a friendly face, someone who reaches out to the Spectral Scoopers' paranormal investigation team and offers them access to the closed pizzeria for their show. He's played by Freddie Carter, with a perpetual slight smile that never quite reaches his eyes, an expression that manages to be both welcoming and subtly unsettling. Right from his first scene, something feels off about Michael, though it takes a while for the movie to reveal why. What makes Michael's introduction so jarring is that the first film gave us no indication he existed. In that movie, Vanessa appeared to be William's only child. There were no family photos showing a brother, no mentions of siblings in dialogue, no hints that William Afton had a son out there somewhere. The Afton family, as established in the first film, consisted of William and Vanessa. That was it. So when Michael suddenly appears in the sequel, announcing that he's Vanessa's brother and he's been working at this abandoned pizzeria, it raises immediate questions about why he was never mentioned before. The in-universe explanation, implied but never explicitly stated, is that Vanessa doesn't like to talk about her family. She kept the truth about being William Afton's daughter hidden from Mike and Abby for as long as she could in the first movie, and presumably she never mentioned having a brother for similar reasons. She wants to distance herself from her family's legacy, to pretend the connections don't exist. But this explanation only goes so far. Why doesn't William mention Michael? Why aren't there photos of him? Where has he been all this time? And what has he been doing? As the movie progresses, we learn that Michael has his own dark agenda. He's not just a security guard doing his job. He's actively working to continue his father's work, to carry on William's legacy in ways that suggest he's been involved with the family business for quite some time. He's the one who invites the Spectral Scoopers into the pizzeria, which directly leads to Charlotte's release from containment. He demonstrates knowledge about the animatronics and seems comfortable navigating the supernatural elements of this location. Here's what makes Michael so mysterious. The movie never explains his motivations at all. We're shown what he does, inviting the investigators in, facilitating the events that unleash Charlotte, but we're never told why. In the games, Michael Afton is a tragic figure seeking redemption for accidentally killing his brother. The movie's Michael appears to be doing the opposite, actively enabling horror to continue. This fundamental difference leaves viewers completely in the dark about what drives this character. Fans have naturally developed theories to fill this gap. Some wonder if he might be under some supernatural influence, or if he's been corrupted by exposure to the animatronics. Others have suggested he might not be William's biological son at all, but someone William manipulated. However, these are purely fan attempts to make sense of a character whose motivations the screenplay simply chose not to address. The movie presents Michael's actions without context, leaving his why as one of its biggest unsolved mysteries. What we do know is that Michael's presence fundamentally changes our understanding of the Afton family. In the games, the Afton family is tragic. William is a monster, but his children are victims. Elizabeth dies in Circus Baby. The crying child dies in the bite of 83. Michael spends years trying to undo his father's damage. They're broken by William's actions, casualties of his obsession and evil. In the movie, at least one of William's children appears to be carrying on his work willingly. This makes the Afton family not just tragic, but actively dangerous in an ongoing way. William is dead, trapped in the Spring Bonnie suite, and waiting to be discovered by the looters in the post-credit scene. But his son is out there, free, working in secret to advance whatever plans William began. The evil doesn't die with William. It survives in Michael, and potentially in Vanessa, once Charlotte has possessed her. The movie also never explains what happened to Michael during the events of the first film. Where was he when William was attacking Mike and Abby at Freddy's? Where was he when his father was defeated and trapped in the suit? Did he know what was happening? Did he try to help or interfere? Or was he already at the original pizzeria, already working on his own agenda, separate from his father's final confrontation with Mike? There's a scene in the second movie where Michael tells the paranormal investigators about the animatronics, specifically about Mangle. He says, "Kids can be so cruel," which is a direct quote from Mangle's loading screen in FNaF World. This line suggests that Michael has extensive knowledge of the animatronics and their histories. But where did he get this knowledge? Did William teach him? Has he been studying these machines independently? The casual way he delivers the line suggests this is information he's known for a long time, but we're never told how he acquired it. Perhaps, most mysteriously, we never see what happens to Michael at the end of the movie. He's not among the casualties when the climax unfolds. He's not shown being arrested or confronted. He simply disappears from the narrative. The story moves on without him, leaving his fate and future plans completely uncertain. Is he still out there? Is he planning something else? Will he appear in the third film? The movie provides no closure to his storyline whatsoever. This lack of resolution is particularly frustrating because Michael is positioned as one of the primary antagonists of the film. He's the one who sets the main plot in motion by giving the spectral scoopers access to the pizzeria. He's working to continue his father's evil. He represents the next generation of horror in this universe. And then he just vanishes from the story without consequence or conclusion. In the post-credit scene, Henry Emily warns Mike about Charlotte's possession of Vanessa and about William's impending return as Springtrap. He says Mike needs to be careful, that there are dangers ahead, but he never mentions Michael. Does Henry know about him? Does he understand that William's son is still out there, still a threat? Or is Michael operating so far under the radar that even Henry, William's former business partner, doesn't know he exists? These questions about Michael Afton represent one of the movie's most significant unexplained mysteries. He's not a minor character or a background detail. He's a major player whose actions drive the plot and whose existence rewrites our understanding of the Afton family dynamic. Yet we know almost nothing about him. Where has he been all these years? What's his relationship with Vanessa really like? Why is he loyal to his father's vision? What does he ultimately want to accomplish? What will he do next? The Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie introduces Michael Afton and then refuses to really explain him. He's there, he's important, and he's mysterious in ways that feel more frustrating than intriguing, because the movie acts as if his motivations should be self-evident when they're anything but. He walks through the story with that slight smile, doing terrible things for unclear reasons, and then he's gone, leaving us with a character who raises more questions than any other single element in the film. Hidden messages, the license plate and other cryptic codes. Five Nights at Freddy's has always been a franchise that rewards the obsessive, the detail-oriented, the fans who pause every frame looking for hidden messages. The second movie continues this tradition with a layer of cryptic codes, background details, and blink and miss it references that communicate meaning beyond the explicit dialogue and plot. Some of these have been decoded and celebrated. Others remain frustratingly ambiguous, hints at deeper lore that we can see but can't quite decipher. Let's explore the most significant of these hidden messages, starting with one of the cleverest references in the entire film. The spectral scoopers arrive at the pizzeria in a van, because of course they do. They're paranormal investigators running a YouTube show, and every paranormal investigation team needs a vehicle covered in their branding. But it's not the spectral scoopers logo that catches the attention of eagle-eyed viewers. It's their license plate, visible for just a few frames as they pull up to the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's pizza location. The plate reads, ICDEDP. Say it out loud. I see dead people. It's a direct reference to the iconic line from The Sixth Sense, that masterpiece of supernatural horror where a child psychologist treats a boy who can communicate with ghosts. The reference is perfect for multiple reasons. First, it's appropriate for a paranormal investigation team's vehicle. It announces their specialty, their whole deal, in a way that's both humorous and on-brand. Second, it works as a horror movie reference in a horror movie, one of those nested acknowledgements that directors love to include. But the really clever part is how it connects to the movie's actual plot. I See Dead People isn't just a reference to another film. It's literally true within the story. Abby has been seeing dead people since before the first movie began, communicating with the spirits of the murdered children who possess the animatronics. The spectral scoopers, despite their equipment and their confidence, don't actually see the dead people they're hunting. But Abby does. She's been seeing them all along, seeing things the adults around her couldn't perceive or understand. This creates a lovely irony. The paranormal investigators who chose this license plate as a kind of advertisement or joke are actually less qualified to see dead people than an 11-year-old girl who doesn't need any equipment at all, who connects with spirits naturally through drawing and dreams. The license plate draws attention to the gap between the spectral scoopers' perception of themselves as ghost hunters and the reality of what's actually happening in this haunted pizzeria. But here's where the mystery deepens. The discovery of this license plate was credited to Ryan Ari of Screen Crush, who pointed it out in one of his breakdown videos. Once fans knew to look for it, they started finding other hidden details, other messages embedded in backgrounds or visible for only a few frames. The question becomes, How many of these are we still missing? How many clever references and coded messages did Scott Cawthon include that haven't been discovered yet? Consider the arcade games visible in the 1982 sequence at the beginning of the film. We've already discussed these in other contexts, but it's worth noting that they're not just decorative. Each one represents a specific FNaF fan game or spin-off. We see Pop Goes Adventure, Candy Fishing from Five Nights at Candy's 3, and the FNaF World Overworld. These aren't random choices. They're acknowledgements of the broader FNaF community, of the fan-created games that have become beloved parts of the franchise's extended universe. But why these specific games? Is there significance to which fan games were chosen for inclusion? Pop Goes is interesting because its creator, Kane Carter, has been involved with official FNaF projects and is deeply connected to the franchise's development. Five Nights at Candy's is one of the most successful and well-regarded fan game series, often cited as an example of how fan creators can take Scott's concept and make something uniquely their own. And FNaF World is Scott's own creation, his attempt at making a more light-hearted RPG-style game set in the franchise's universe. Together, these three games represent the FNaF community's ecosystem: official spin-offs, high-quality fan games, and the collaborative spirit between Scott and his fans. But is that all they represent? Or is there some deeper meaning to their specific inclusion in this scene from 1982, before any of the actual games in the series were set or released? Are we meant to understand that these games or something like them existed in the movie's universe? Or is this just pure meta-reference with no in-universe significance? The song playing during this same sequence is Maniac from the 1983 film Flashdance, a choice that works on multiple levels. It's period appropriate for 1982, close enough that it would realistically be playing in a pizzeria at that time. It's upbeat and energetic, matching the chaotic energy of a children's party. But it's also a song about losing control, about wildness and danger lurking beneath a festive surface. The lyrics, "Just a steel town girl on a Saturday night," take on darker implications when you're watching a scene where a child is about to be murdered and another child is about to die trying to save him. Music choices in film are rarely accidental, especially in a Scott Cawthon project, where every detail tends to serve multiple purposes. So we have to ask, is Maniac just a good song choice for the scene, or does it mean something more? The title alone feels significant. Charlotte is about to witness William's maniacal behavior, his willingness to kill a child in his own restaurant. She's about to die because of a man who's lost control of any moral restraints he might have once had. The song title describes William perfectly. But was that intentional? Or are we reading too much into a song choice? Then there's the imagery throughout the film that recalls specific games without explicitly referencing them. The way Vanessa sets up her dream sequence, using objects from the trophy box arranged on a shelf. Visual echoes of FNaF 4's bedroom mechanics, where you had to listen for breathing and use your flashlight strategically. The way the toy animatronics move through the town during FazFest recalls the free roaming mechanics from Help Wanted 2. The way Abby has to wind the music box to try to calm Charlotte mirrors the music box mechanic from FNaF 2 that players remember with a mix of nostalgia and dread. Are these just visual references for fans to appreciate? Or are they meant to suggest something about how the mechanics we've learned in the games actually function in this cinematic universe? When Abby winds that music box, is she doing something that objectively works to calm the marionette? Or is it more like a prayer, something that might work through belief rather than mechanism? The movie never explains the actual rules of how spirits and animatronics interact. So we're left to wonder whether these game mechanics have real power in the movie's reality, or whether they're just nods to player experience. There's also the matter of the various YouTuber cameos scattered throughout both films. These aren't just fun extras, they're acknowledgements of the specific people who helped make FNaF the cultural phenomenon it became. MatPat voices Toy Bonnie, after years of creating theory videos about the franchise. Korix Kenshin appears as a taxi driver who gets Toy Chica in his cab, a callback to his popular FNaF gameplay videos. These inclusions feel like thank yous from Scott to the content creators who helped build and sustain the community. But then you start to wonder, are these people meant to exist as themselves in the movie's universe? Or are they playing characters who just happen to look like them? When MatPat's Toy Bonnie speaks, are we meant to hear the game theorist voice acting in a horror movie? Or is that voice choice meant to signal something about Toy Bonnie's personality and role? The movie treats these cameos as fun Easter eggs, but it never quite clarifies whether they break the fourth wall or exist naturally within the story. Perhaps the most mysterious hidden element is something that isn't explicitly shown, but is implied through various visual cues and background details. Throughout the movie, there are symbols and designs visible on the walls, on arcade cabinets, on the animatronics themselves. Some of these are recognizable as FNaF iconography. Others are less clear. Fan communities have spent hours analyzing frames, trying to determine if these background designs mean something, or if they're just atmospheric decoration. The problem with this kind of analysis is that it's nearly impossible to know where to draw the line between intentional hidden messages and pareidolia, that human tendency to see patterns and meaning in random visual noise. Scott Cawthon is famous for including hidden details, but he's also practical enough to know that not everything can be a clue. At some point, a pizza restaurant set just needs to look like a pizza restaurant, even if every design choice could theoretically carry hidden significance. Still, the license plate proves that some messages are deliberately hidden and waiting to be found. The arcade game references prove that Scott thinks about these things, that he chooses specific details to include rather than just filling backgrounds with generic props. So when fans find something that looks like it might mean something, it's worth considering that it probably does, even if we haven't figured out what yet. What we're left with is a movie that functions on multiple levels of comprehension. The surface level tells a complete story that makes sense even if you've never played the games. The next level rewards fans who recognize references and appreciate callbacks. And then there's a deeper level still, a layer of hidden messages and coded meanings that we can only partially access. Mysteries within mysteries that may not be fully revealed until future films provide additional context. The ICDDP license plate is our confirmation that this deeper level exists. It's proof that Scott embedded messages for the truly obsessive fans to find, details that reward frame-by-frame analysis and careful attention to backgrounds. But it also raises the question, what else is hidden that we haven't found yet? What other clever codes and cryptic references are waiting in the shadows of this film, visible but not yet decoded, present but not yet understood? The arcade references, Pop Goes, Candy, and the fan game connection. In the opening sequence of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, during those chaotic moments of the 1982 party before everything goes terribly wrong, the camera pans across a row of arcade cabinets. Children cluster around them, mashing buttons and moving joysticks with the intense focus only kids playing video games can achieve. For most viewers, this is just period-appropriate set decoration, the kind of detail that helps establish we're watching a flashback to the early 1980s, when arcade games were the primary form of interactive entertainment kids could access. But for dedicated FNaF fans, for those who understand the franchise's extended universe and community, these arcade games represent something much more significant and much more mysterious. Let's examine each game in turn and explore the implications of their inclusion. The first cabinet shows Pop Go's Adventure, displaying gameplay footage directly from Pop Go's arcade, a fan game created by Kane Carter. Pop Go's began as a fan project, but has since evolved into something more officially recognized, with Kane working on projects connected to the franchise and becoming a respected voice in the community. The game features animatronic characters distinct from the main FNaF cast, but operating under similar horror premises, exploring themes of artificial intelligence, memory, and the lasting impact of trauma. Seeing Pop Go's adventure in the movie is fascinating because it blurs the line between the official FNaF universe and the community-created content that has become inseparable from the franchise's identity. Scott Cawthon has always had a special relationship with his fanbase, encouraging creativity and celebrating the works fans create inspired by his games. Including a fan game in an official movie takes this relationship to a new level, suggesting that these community creations aren't just tolerated, but are actually part of the franchise's DNA in some fundamental way. But it raises questions about canonicity and universe building. Does Pop Go's exist as a real arcade game in the movie's 1982 timeline? That would be impossible, since the fan game was created in our reality in 2016, decades after the movie's flashback sequence. So we're meant to understand this as pure meta-reference, a way of acknowledging the fan community without suggesting these specific games literally exist in the movie's world. But then why include actual gameplay footage? Why not just use generic arcade graphics that vaguely resemble these games? The second cabinet displays candy fishing, specifically the fishing minigame from Five Nights at Candy's 3, another beloved fan game series. Five Nights at Candy's, created by Emil Mako, is frequently cited as one of the best FNaF fan games, with production values and storytelling that rival the official games. The series takes place in a family entertainment center, featuring animatronic characters like Candy the Cat and Cindy the Cat, exploring horror through different mechanics and narrative approaches than the main FNaF series. The inclusion of Candy's fishing minigame is particularly interesting because it's such a specific reference. It's not just Candy the Cat appearing in some generic context. It's a particular minigame from the third installment of the series, a detail that only fans who've played through Five Nights at Candy's 3 would recognize. This level of specificity suggests these references aren't just casual nods, but deliberate choices that Scott made, probably in consultation with the fan game creators, to honor specific beloved moments from community-created content. The third arcade cabinet shows that FNaF world over world, the colorful pixel art landscape from Scott's own 2016 RPG spin-off. FNaF World was controversial when it first released, with many fans feeling that its light-hearted approach clashed with the series' horror roots. Scott responded to criticism by temporarily pulling the game from Steam, reworking it, and re-releasing it for free. The game eventually found its audience and became appreciated for what it was trying to do, creating a space where the franchise's characters could exist in a more whimsical adventure game context. Seeing FNaF World represented alongside the fan games creates an interesting equivalence. It suggests that Scott views his own experimental spin-off and the community-created content as equally valid expressions of what FNaF can be, equally important to the franchise's identity. This is a generous and humble way for a creator to relate to their fan base, acknowledging that the universe they started has grown beyond their sole control and has become a shared creative space. But again, the inclusion raises mysteries rather than resolving them. Why these 3 games specifically? Why not 5 Nights at Candy's 1 or 2 instead of 3? Why Pop Go's Adventure rather than the main Pop Go's game? Why FNaF World, which isn't even a horror game, alongside these other titles? Is there any significance to these specific choices, or were they simply the games Scott felt most deserved recognition? Some fans have theorized that the arcade games might represent different timeline branches or alternate realities within the FNaF universe. This would align with theories about FNaF World serving as a kind of meta-commentary on the series itself, with its characters existing outside the normal timeline and its gameplay mechanics suggesting layers of reality beyond what we normally access. If the arcade games in the 1982 flashback are meant to represent alternate versions of the FNaF story, then including Pop Go's and Candy makes sense as representations of what-if scenarios, stories that explore similar themes through different characters and situations. But this interpretation might be reading too much into what could simply be a nice gesture toward the fan community. Scott has always been generous about crediting and celebrating fan creators. Including their work in an official movie is consistent with his history of lifting up community members, from hiring fan game creators to work on official projects to featuring fan theories in marketing materials. What makes these arcade references particularly mysterious is that they're not just Easter eggs you can catch or miss. They're part of the movie's fabric, woven into a scene that's crucial to the plot. Charlotte sees these arcade games. She's in this space with them. They're part of her last moments before William attacks the boy and she intervenes. The arcade cabinets are there when she's stabbed, when she dies in the marionette's arms, when her soul fuses with the machine. Does this matter? Does the presence of Pop Go's, Candy and FNaF World in this specific scene carry some significance we haven't decoded yet? Or is it just good set decoration that happens to include fun references? The movie never tells us, never draws attention to these details in dialogue or through close-ups that would signal their importance. They're simply there, visible to those who know where to look, mysterious to those who understand what they're seeing but can't quite figure out why they're seeing it. Consider also that these games are shown being played by children in 1982, during what's supposed to be one of the happiest days at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, before everything goes wrong. There's something bittersweet about that, about children playing games that won't actually be created for decades, games that exist in our reality as horror experiences designed to scare players and explore dark themes. These kids are having fun, enjoying their party, not knowing that within hours, Charlotte will be dead and her spirit will be trapped in this building for the next 20 years. The arcade references also connect to a larger theme in both FNaF movies, the commodification and commercialization of tragedy. In the second film, we see Fazfest, where the town has turned the horrific events at Freddy's into a campy celebration, a fun community event that treats real deaths as entertainment. The arcade games fit into this pattern. They're entertainment created from horror, games that let players experience fear and danger in a controlled environment, turning something scary into something fun. Scott Cawthon knows this because he created it. The entire FNaF franchise is built on this transformation, taking childhood fears about creepy animatronics and dark restaurants and turning them into compelling horror games that millions of people have enjoyed. By including fan games in the movie, he's acknowledging the layers of transformation, the way his original scary experience inspired others to create their own scary experiences, building a community around shared fear as entertainment. But within the movie's universe, these arcade games exist before the tragedies they're metatextually based on. They're there in 1982, before Charlotte dies, before the missing children incident, before any of the horror that would eventually inspire Scott to create FNaF in our reality. This temporal paradox creates a strange loop, where the horror inspires the games which exist before the horror which inspires the games. It's a deliberately disorienting relationship between different levels of reality, and it's not clear whether we're meant to think deeply about it or just appreciate the references. What's clear is that these arcade game appearances are more than just background decoration. They're carefully chosen, specifically implemented, and deliberately placed in a narratively significant scene. They connect the movie to the broader FNaF community and ecosystem. They acknowledge fan creators and celebrate their contributions to the franchise. And they create questions about canon, reality, and how we're supposed to understand the relationship between the games we play and the movie we're watching. Until Scott or Emma Tammy explicitly explain why these specific games were chosen and what their inclusion means, we're left to theorize and wonder. Are they just fun nods to the community? Are they suggesting something about the nature of reality in the FNaF universe? Are they Scott's way of saying the fan games are just as valid and important as his official content? All of these interpretations might be true simultaneously, or none of them might be what he intended. What's undeniable is that 3 arcade cabinets in a flashback scene have generated more discussion and analysis than many movies' entire plots. That's the Five Nights at Freddy's community in action, finding significance in details, refusing to accept that anything is just decoration, always searching for the next clue that might unlock deeper understanding. Those arcade games sit in that 1982 pizzeria, glowing and beeping and calling to players who will never make it out of that party alive, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what it means that they're there. Sister location shadows, mini marionettes, and Ballora's cameo. As we delve deeper into the unexplained elements of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, we encounter references that point towards Sister Location, the 5th main game in the franchise and one of its darkest, most psychologically complex installments. These references appear briefly, almost apologetically, as if the movie wants to acknowledge Sister Location's existence in this cinematic universe without fully committing to exploring its implications. The result is a cluster of mysterious appearances that tease a much larger story the movie isn't ready to tell. The most overtly threatening Sister Location reference comes in the form of the mini marionettes, those smaller versions of the puppet that attack Rob, one of the Spectral Scooper's team members. The scene unfolds in the subterranean areas of the original pizzeria, where the 3 paranormal investigators have split up in defiance of every horror movie rule about staying together. Rob ventures into what appears to be a maintenance tunnel or service corridor, his camera capturing the darkness ahead as he searches for paranormal activity. What he finds is far worse than he was prepared for. Small, puppet-like creatures emerge from the shadows, swarming toward him with mechanical precision and malicious intent. They're not exact replicas of the marionette, but miniature variations, similar enough to be recognizable, but different in crucial ways. They move differently, more like piranhas than like the deliberate, purposeful movements of the full-size puppet. And they attack as a group, overwhelming Rob through numbers and coordination, rather than through individual threat. For fans of Sister Location, these mini marionettes immediately call to mind the mini-arenas, those small ballerina figures associated with Ballora that serve as secondary antagonists in that game. The mini-arenas climb on the player, obscuring vision and making it impossible to defend against other threats. They work together, using overwhelming numbers rather than individual strength. The mini marionettes in the movie function similarly, suggesting a connection between these creatures that the film never explicitly draws. But what are they? Where did they come from? In the games, the mini-arenas are part of Circus Baby's Pizza World, the underground facility where William Afton conducted his experiments with child-catching animatronics and remnant injection. Their presence in the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location is therefore completely unexplained. This pizzeria predates Sister Location in the timeline. It shouldn't have any of William's more advanced creations, shouldn't contain any of the Funtime animatronics or their associated entities. Unless William was experimenting here long before he built Circus Baby's Pizza World. Unless the original pizzeria was always more than just a restaurant, serving as a testing ground for the technologies he would later refine in his underground facility. This would make the mini marionettes early prototypes, primitive versions of the swarming attack strategy he would perfect with the mini-arenas. It would suggest that everything we see in Sister Location had roots in experiments William conducted years earlier, experiments that might have occurred in this very building. But the movie doesn't explain any of this. The mini marionettes appear, they attack, they serve their function in the plot by killing Rob and demonstrating that Charlotte's control extends to multiple animatronic forms, and then they're gone. We never see them again. We're never told how Charlotte can control them, or where they came from, or what they are beyond being smaller, deadlier versions of her primary vessel. What makes this particularly frustrating is that the mini marionettes aren't just background details or Easter eggs. They're active participants in the plot. They kill a character. They demonstrate capabilities that raise questions about the marionette's power and reach. They suggest technological and spiritual mechanisms that the movie otherwise doesn't address, and yet they're treated as if their presence requires no explanation, as if the audience should simply accept that yes, there are evil puppet piranhas in the underground sections of this pizzeria, and no, we're not going to discuss why. The Ballora reference is even more subtle, but potentially more significant. During Vanessa's dream sequence, when she's confronting her father and arranging the items from his trophy box, she winds up a music box. The mechanism plays a delicate tune, and as it does, a small figure rotates inside the box. The figure is clearly a ballerina, spinning gracefully to the music in that hypnotic way music box figures do. For casual viewers, this is just a music box, a normal object used to help Vanessa focus her mind for dream manipulation. But fans familiar with Sister Location immediately recognize the ballerina as reminiscent of Ballora, the dancing animatronic from that game. Ballora is one of the most unsettling characters in the entire franchise, a blind animatronic that hunts by sound, gliding through darkened halls while singing lullabies about broken things and wanting to be beautiful. She's closely associated with music boxes and music in general, with the player needing to listen carefully to track her movements. The ballerina figure in the movie isn't exactly Ballora. It's much smaller, simplified, more like what you'd expect to find in an actual music box rather than a full-sized animatronic. But the association is there, deliberate and unmistakable. This music box, used by Vanessa to enter her dream state, contains a miniature version of one of her father's creations. The question is, why? One possibility is that William gave Vanessa this music box when she was a child, the same way he gave her the other items from his trophy box. This would make it another example of him intertwining his daughter's life with his dark work, surrounding her with his creations even when she was too young to understand what they really were. The music box might have been Vanessa's favorite toy growing up, something she loved and cherished, not knowing her father designed it as a miniature version of one of his child-catching animatronics. Another possibility is that the music box serves a function beyond just helping Vanessa focus. In the FNaF universe, music boxes have power. In FNaF 2, keeping the marionette's music box wound is essential to preventing an attack. The music seems to calm or contain the spirit somehow, suggesting there's a supernatural mechanism at work rather than just a preference for melody. Could Vanessa's music box contain similar properties? Could the Ballora figure serve some purpose in dream manipulation or spiritual protection that we're not told about? The movie never clarifies. The music box appears, plays its tune, spins its tiny ballerina, and serves its narrative purpose of helping establish the dream sequence's atmosphere. Fans notice the Ballora connection, recognize it as a sister location reference, and then are left wondering what it means that this particular animatronic is represented in Vanessa's most personal possession, the tool she uses to confront her father in dreams. What's particularly intriguing about both the mini marionettes and the Ballora figure is how they suggest sister location exists in this cinematic universe without actually showing us any of that game's primary content. We don't see Circus Baby's pizza world. We don't see the scooping room or the fun-time animatronics child-catching mechanisms. We don't see Michael Afton working as a technician, though his presence as a character might connect to this storyline. We just see these small references, these hints that yes, all of that happened or will happen, but the movie isn't ready to engage with it directly. This creates a strange tension where sister location seems to simultaneously exist and not exist in the movies. Its iconography is present. Its creatures appear in modified forms. Its themes of experimental technology and deliberate child murder are absolutely central to William's character. But the specific location, story, and characters that define sister location remain unaddressed. We're given pieces of a puzzle we can't complete because most of the pieces are still missing. Some fans have theorized that the third movie might dive deeper into sister location content, possibly showing us Circus Baby's pizza world in flashbacks, or revealing that Michael's motivations connect to the scooping incident and his transformation into a purple guy-style undead security guard. The mini marionettes and Ballora figure could be set up for this larger revelation, breadcrumbs leading toward a story the films aren't ready to tell yet. But it's also possible these are just references, acknowledgements that sister location exists in this universe without any intention of fully adapting its story. The FNaF films clearly aren't doing direct game adaptations. They're creating their own narrative while incorporating elements from across the franchise. Maybe the mini marionettes and Ballora figure are included simply because Scott wanted to represent sister location somehow, to ensure that games fans felt acknowledged even though its main story won't be told in this medium. what we're left with is another set of mysterious inclusions, details that suggest connections to larger stories without providing the context needed to understand those connections. The mini marionettes swim through underground waters like creatures that have always been there, serving Charlotte's will in ways that make sense for this movie's plot, but raise questions about how they came to exist in this location. The ballerina spins in her music box, representing either an innocent toy or a sinister link to Williams' experimental animatronics, and we're given no way to determine which interpretation is correct. These sister location shadows drift through the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, present but not fully realized, acknowledged but not explained. They're ghosts of a story that exists somewhere in this universe's history or future, fragments of lore that tease without satisfying, mysteries that feel less like puzzles to be solved, and more like whispers of secrets we're not yet cleared to know. The marionette's unexplained abilities. Throughout the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, Charlotte's spirit demonstrates powers and capabilities that extend far beyond what we might expect from a simple, ghostly possession. The marionette doesn't just inhabit an animatronic body and use it to move around. The movie shows it controlling multiple entities simultaneously, possessing living humans, and maintaining awareness across the entire town. These abilities drive the plot, but the film never explains how they work or where they come from. The most obvious example is the toy animatronics. Once the perimeter lockdown is broken, these robots, Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Mangle, and Balloon Boy, begin coordinating attacks during FazFest. They move with purpose, targeting adults while avoiding children. The movie suggests Charlotte is somehow directing them all, though the mechanism remains unclear. When Vanessa eventually severs what's described as a wireless connection, the animatronics deactivate, which could suggest technological control. But how a 20-year-old spirit would interface with wireless systems is never addressed. The human possession raises even more questions. When Lisa from the Spectral Scoopers touches the music box, Charlotte takes control of her body, forcing her to move against her will. Later, Charlotte possesses Vanessa in a more complete way, with Charlotte's child personality speaking through Vanessa's adult body. This represents a fundamentally different kind of possession than we've seen with the animatronics. Fans familiar with the games will note this seems inconsistent with how possession has worked previously. In the first movie, the murdered children's spirits appeared bound to their animatronic vessels. Charlotte's ability to jump between vessels and possess living humans suggests either she has unique capabilities or the rules of possession in this cinematic universe work differently than established. The movie doesn't clarify which interpretation is correct. The movie leaves these mechanics unexplained, which has prompted various fan interpretations. Some viewers have suggested Charlotte's powers might stem from being the first spirit in this universe, giving her a unique relationship with death and possession. Others have noted her vendetta specifically targets adults who fail to protect children, wondering if this focused rage somehow amplifies her capabilities. A few fans have even theorized that her pre-existing connection to the marionette, that unexplained feeling she had before dying, might indicate the animatronic was always uniquely suited to grant unusual powers. However, it's important to note these are all attempts by viewers to understand something the movie chose not to explain. The film shows us what Charlotte can do: control animatronics remotely, possess humans, maintain widespread awareness, but it never tells us how or why these abilities work. Whether this represents unique spiritual powers, advanced technology, or something else entirely, remains completely mysterious. The movie shows us that Charlotte's vendetta is specifically against adults, against parents who she believes failed to protect children, the way the adults at the party failed to help her. This specific, directed hatred might be what gives her the power to possess humans and control machines. Her will is so strong, her anger so focused, that she's bent the rules of death to serve her desire for revenge. But again, this is speculation. The movie never confirms this interpretation. What about Charlotte's awareness? How does she know what's happening across the entire town? When the toy animatronics roam during Faz Fest, Charlotte, through the marionette, is simultaneously interacting with Abby at the pizzeria. She's in multiple places at once, perceiving events happening miles apart, coordinating actions across a wide geographical area. This isn't how ghosts typically work in fiction. Even very powerful spirits are usually limited to a specific location or require effort to extend their influence beyond their anchor point. But Charlotte seems to have awareness and control that extends wherever the animatronics go, as if she's seeing through their eyes, hearing through their audio sensors, processing information from multiple sources simultaneously. This is more like being a computer program distributed across a network than like being a ghost haunting a location. It suggests either that Charlotte's consciousness has become something fundamentally different from a human spirit, or that the marionette's technological systems are far more advanced than we've been led to believe. The movie also never explains why Charlotte can be contained at all. For 20 years, she was trapped in the original pizzeria, unable to leave or extend her influence beyond that building. But once released by the spectral scooper's interference, she can possess people, control animatronics, and extend her awareness across town. What was containing her? The music box mechanism seems to play a role, as winding it temporarily calms her down. But is this a technological restraint or a spiritual one? Does the music box actually have power over Charlotte's spirit? Or does it just soothe her emotions the way a lullaby might calm an upset child? When Vanessa eventually defeats Charlotte, or at least separates her from control of the animatronics, it's not entirely clear how this is accomplished. Vanessa regains control of her own body, presumably by overpowering Charlotte's will with her own. But what allows this? Is it love for Abby and Mike that gives Vanessa strength Charlotte can't overcome? Is there a technological solution, some system Mike activates that breaks Charlotte's control? The movie's climax is somewhat unclear about the exact mechanics of how the possession ends. These questions about Charlotte's abilities matter because they define what's possible in this universe. If ghosts can possess living humans, if they can control multiple entities simultaneously, if their awareness can extend across entire towns, then the threat level of possession is much higher than we might have assumed. Every possessed animatronic is potentially a hive mind node. Every dead spirit a possible body hopper. The implications are terrifying, but they're also confusing because we don't know the rules. Compare this to the spirits of the murdered children in the first movie. They inhabited their animatronics and seemed mostly confused, lashing out at adults because they mistook them for William. They were tragic, victims even in death, operating on animal instincts rather than with Charlotte's directed intelligence and supernatural capabilities. What makes Charlotte so different? Is it just her personality and will? Is it something about how she died or what she died near? Is it the marionette itself granting these powers? The movie could have explained this. It could have given us a scene where someone who understands, maybe Henry, explains what Charlotte has become and why she can do the things she does. Instead, we're left to watch her demonstrate abilities that seem inconsistent with other possession cases in this universe. Powers that range from the expected animatronic control to the bizarre human possession and remote awareness, without any exposition about how any of it works. This isn't necessarily bad storytelling. Horror often works better when the monster's abilities and limitations aren't fully explained, when we don't understand the rules well enough to feel safe. Not knowing what Charlotte can and can't do, not understanding how her powers work, makes her more threatening, more unpredictable. But it does leave us with mysteries that might never be answered. Questions about the metaphysics of possession in this universe that we can observe but can't explain. What we know for certain is that Charlotte's spirit in the marionette is more powerful than any possessed animatronic we've seen before. She can control multiple entities, possess living humans, coordinate complex attacks, and maintain awareness across large areas. She's been contained for 20 years, but once released, becomes a threat that requires the original possessed animatronics to sacrifice themselves to stop. She can transfer herself between vessels, moving from animatronic to human, and potentially back again. What we don't know, and what the movie steadfastly refuses to explain, is how any of this is possible. Where do these powers come from? What are their limits? Could other spirits do similar things under the right circumstances? Or is Charlotte unique? Why was she containable before, but not after release? How does a ghost interface with technology and biological bodies? These mysteries define Charlotte's character and her threat level, but they remain stubbornly unexplained. Another layer of Five Nights at Freddy's lore that we can see but can't quite understand. Post-credits mysteries and future implications. The movie ends, the credits roll, and just when you think the story is finished, just when you're gathering your things to leave or reaching for the remote to turn off your screen, the film pulls you back in. Not once, but twice. First, with a mid-credits scene that's as expected as it is chilling, and then with an audio message that raises as many questions as it attempts to answer. These post-credits moments are ostensibly about setting up the third film, about promising audiences that, yes, there will be more, that this story isn't over, but they're also mysteries in themselves, moments that seem straightforward, but contain unexplained elements, questions that linger long after the credits finally finish rolling. The mid-credits scene is the most visually dramatic. We're back at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, the one from the first movie, where Mike worked as night guard, and where the spirits of the murdered children finally found peace. The building is decrepit now, abandoned and falling apart, with water damage, graffiti, and the general decay that comes from years of neglect. Three young men break in, treasure hunters looking for Freddy Fazbear memorabilia they can use for their haunted house attraction. This setup is pulled directly from Five Nights at Freddy's 3, where Fazbear's Fright is a horror attraction based on the real location's dark history. The movie is clearly setting up a direct adaptation of that game, which makes sense narratively. William Afton needs to return somehow, and his transformation into Springtrap is one of the franchise's most iconic elements. But here's what's mysterious. How much time has passed? The mid-credits scene appears to take place sometime after the main plot, enough time for the pizzeria to have decayed further, and for these three men to have heard about the location and decided to loot it. But is this weeks later, months, years? The movie never specifies. This matters because it affects our understanding of what happens between this film and the next one. If Springtrap is discovered relatively soon after the events we just witnessed, then the third movie might pick up almost immediately, If years have passed, then Michael, Abby, and Vanessa's lives might have moved on considerably before the next crisis hits. The looters themselves are also mysterious. They're planning a haunted house attraction based on Freddy Fazbear's history, which means they know about the murders and the tragedies. But how much do they know? Do they understand that the animatronics were actually possessed? Do they believe the urban legends? Or do they think it's all just scary stories to attract customers? The movie doesn't give us much insight into their perspective. What's most mysterious about the scene is what they find in that hidden back room. The space has been sealed off, invisible to anyone who doesn't know to look for it. This is presumably one of the safe rooms mentioned in the games, spaces that were removed from digital maps and kept secret for employee use only. The yellow rabbit suit sits slumped in the corner, and inside it, William Afton's corpse has been decomposing for over a year. The men don't fully understand what they're looking at. They comment on the smell, recognizing something is wrong, but they decide to take the suit anyway, wrapping it in plastic to preserve it from the rain. This decision seals their fate, though they don't know it yet. As they leave, one of Springtrap's eyes flickers to life, indicating that William's spirit is awakening, that the corpse inside the suit is about to become something far more dangerous than just a decomposing body. But how is this happening? In the first movie, William was killed when the spirits of his victims attacked him, forcing him into the Spring Bonnie suit, which then activated its spring locks, crushing and impaling him. He died screaming, trapped inside the machine, and the spirits seemed satisfied that justice had been served. The first film ended with a sense of closure, with the children's spirits presumably at peace. So why is William coming back? What's animating him now? In the games, Springtrap's existence is explained through remnant, that supernatural substance that binds souls to metal. William's hatred and will to live are so strong that even death can't stop him. His spirit clings to the suit, fusing with it, becoming a twisted hybrid of corpse and machine that can't truly die. But the movies haven't explained remnant. They haven't established this mechanism for survival after death. Is the movie suggesting William's return is purely spiritual, his evil too strong to be contained by death? Or is there a scientific explanation we haven't been given yet? The flicker of the eye suggests some kind of consciousness, some awareness returning to the corpse. But is this William's ghost possessing his own dead body? Or is it something else, some residual energy or malice that's taken on a life of its own? The fact that Springtrap awakens specifically when people are nearby is also interesting. It suggests that human presence might trigger or accelerate the reanimation process. Perhaps William's spirit has been dormant, waiting, and the presence of potential victims is what rouses it. Or perhaps the act of moving the suit, of disturbing William's remains, is what breaks whatever spiritual seal was keeping him contained. The movie doesn't explain, leaving us to wonder what exactly the looters have unleashed. Then there's the audio message that plays after all the credits have rolled. Henry Emily's warning to Mike. Henry reveals that he was William's business partner, which fans already knew from the games, but which is new information for Mike. He warns that Charlotte, possessing Vanessa, is dangerous and that Mike needs to be careful. He also implies he has information about William, suggesting he understood what his partner was doing, or at least suspected. But this message raises more questions than it answers. When was it recorded? Is Henry leaving this message in the present day? Or is it an old recording Mike is just now receiving? Where is Henry? Is he in hiding? Is he also in danger? The message suggests Henry wants to help, that he's on Mike's side against the evil his former partner created. But what can he actually do? What information does he have that might be useful? Most mysteriously, Henry doesn't mention Michael Afton at all. He warns about Charlotte and about William's return, but says nothing about William's son still being out there, still working to continue his father's legacy. Does Henry not know about Michael? Or does he know but have reasons for not mentioning him in this message? The omission feels significant, but we can't determine whether it's an oversight or a deliberate choice. The message also confirms that Vanessa is still possessed, or at least still dealing with Charlotte's presence. The movie's ending suggested Vanessa had regained control, that she was free, but Henry's warning implies the situation is more complicated, that Charlotte remains a threat even if she's no longer fully in control. This sets up ongoing conflict for the third film, where presumably Mike will have to find a way to free his friend from the spirit that's taken up residence in her mind. What's particularly frustrating about this post-credits content is how it promises answers in the next film, while creating new mysteries in the present one. We know Springtrap is coming. We know Henry has information to share. We know Vanessa's situation is unresolved. These are set-up elements, plot threads being laid for future stories. But they're also mysteries in themselves, moments that contain unexplained elements and raise questions about how things work in this universe. For instance, if William can come back as Springtrap, can other spirits return after being put to rest? The murdered children seem to find peace at the end of the first movie, their spirits departing after finally getting justice. But if death isn't permanent for William, is it permanent for them? Could they return if circumstances required it? The movie leaves this possibility open without confirming or denying it. Similarly, if Charlotte can possess Vanessa indefinitely, what does this mean for human characters going forward? Is everyone vulnerable to possession now? Can any spirit take over any human? Or does it require special circumstances? Charlotte's possession of Vanessa seemed to require extended contact and specific conditions, but we don't know the actual rules. Future films might explore this, or they might treat it as a one-time occurrence without establishing general principles. The post-credit scenes are doing what post-credit scenes do, promising continuation, teasing the next installment, leaving audiences excited for what comes next. But in the process, they create mysteries of their own, moments that feel significant but remain unexplained. Why is Springtrap awakening now? What makes Henry think he can help? What's the actual status of Vanessa's possession? These questions join all the others we've explored tonight, adding to the growing list of things the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie showed us but didn't explain. And that might be exactly the point. Five Nights at Freddy's has always been about mysteries, about questions without clear answers, about a community of fans working together to decode hidden meaning and solve complex puzzles. By leaving so many elements unexplained, by creating mysteries that span across multiple films, the movies are inviting us into that same process of collective theorizing, of working together to understand what we've seen and what it might mean for future stories. The FazFest phenomenon, commodifying horror. One of the most intriguing background elements of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie is FazFest, the town-wide celebration that turns the horrific events at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into a campy, commercialized festival. This concept is mentioned throughout the film and provides the backdrop for the toy animatronics rampage, but it's never fully explored or explained. What we're left with is a fascinating commentary on how society processes tragedy, how horror becomes entertainment, and how quickly people can forget or trivialize real suffering when it becomes distant enough to feel safe. The setup is brilliant in its cynicism. 1 year after Mike Schmidt survived his nights at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, after he defeated William Afton and freed the spirits of murdered children, after genuine horror unfolded in that building, the town has turned it all into a festival. There are games, food vendors, costume contests, and haunted house attractions all themed around Freddy's. Children wear animatronic masks. Adults dress up as the characters. Everyone is having fun celebrating the place where kids actually died. But here's what makes this so mysterious and unsettling. How much does the town actually know? The movie never clarifies what became public knowledge after the first film's events. Does everyone know that William Afton murdered children? Do they understand the animatronics were genuinely possessed? Or has the story been sanitized, turned into urban legends and spooky tales that people don't actually believe happened? The way FazFest is portrayed suggests the latter, that the real horror has been transformed into fiction in the public consciousness, allowing people to celebrate it without feeling guilty. This raises questions about how the cover-up worked, if there was one. Vanessa was a police officer. Mike had witnesses to the events. William Afton's crimes should have been exposed. But FazFest's existence suggests that either the truth was suppressed, perhaps by Fazbear Entertainment itself protecting its brand, or the truth was dismissed as impossible, too strange for people to accept. Maybe the official story is that nothing supernatural happened, that the deaths were just tragic accidents or the work of a mundane killer, allowing the location to be mythologized rather than properly mourned. The festival attracts hundreds of people, maybe thousands, based on the crowd scenes we glimpse. This means the entire community has bought into the commercialization of these tragedies. They're bringing their children to celebrate at a place where children died. They're wearing costumes of the animatronics that housed murdered kids' spirits. They're eating pizza and playing games and having a great time, completely disconnected from the real suffering that occurred. This is where the movie's social commentary becomes sharper. FazFest isn't just a plot device to explain why animatronics are roaming the town. It's a reflection of how real-world society treats tragedy. We make true crime entertainment. We visit dark tourism sites. We create horror experiences based on real murders and disasters. We turn suffering into spectacle, distance ourselves from genuine pain by packaging it as fun, scary stories. The movie is holding up a mirror to its own audience, many of whom play horror games for entertainment that are based on child murder. Charlotte's targeting of parents during FazFest takes on additional significance in this context. She's not just killing adults because she's confused, or because they represent authority figures. She's specifically going after the parents who brought their children to celebrate at the site of child murders. She's punishing people for their willingness to commodify and trivialize the suffering of victims like her. It's righteous anger against a society that has forgotten or chosen to ignore that real people died here. The movie shows us glimpses of FazFest, families laughing and playing games, kids running around in Freddy masks, vendors selling Fazbear merchandise. It's colorful and lively, and exactly the kind of event that would actually happen if a Chuck E. Cheese-style restaurant had a dark history. This authenticity makes it more disturbing. We can absolutely imagine real communities doing this, turning tragedy into tourism, creating festivals around horror, forgetting that behind the entertainment are real victims. But what we don't see at FazFest is anyone remembering the actual victims. There are no memorials visible in the background, no moments of silence, no acknowledgement that this celebration is built on a foundation of real deaths. The festival is pure escapism, treating Freddy Fazbear's as a fictional horror property rather than a place where actual children suffered and died. This erasure of victims is itself a kind of violence, a secondary trauma inflicted by a society that values entertainment over remembrance. The toy animatronics attack during FazFest is therefore narratively perfect. The very thing the town is celebrating, the animatronics themselves, become genuine threats again. The fake horror they're enjoying becomes real horror. The distance they've created between themselves and the actual tragedies collapses. Suddenly, the costumes aren't fun anymore. The animatronics aren't cute or scary in a controlled way. They're actually dangerous, actually killing people, and the festival atmosphere transforms into genuine panic. Mike and Vanessa's decision to keep the truth from Abby about what really happened at Freddy's parallels the community's relationship with FazFest. They've chosen to hide the reality to present a sanitized version of events, just like the festival presents a sanitized version of the location's history. Both are attempts to protect children from dark truths, but both also contribute to a broader societal pattern of denial and forgetting. What's particularly mysterious about FazFest is how it came together so quickly. The first movie's events happened only a year ago. That's an incredibly short time for a community to process a tragedy, investigate what happened, and then decide to turn it into a festival. This speed suggests either that the true horror of what occurred was never publicly known, or that Fazbear Entertainment itself, still operating in some capacity, pushed for this commercialization as a way to rebrand and control the narrative. We know from the first movie that Fazbear Entertainment is skilled at covering up problems and presenting a friendly face despite dark realities. The existence of multiple locations, the casual way they hire security guards for dangerous positions, the company's survival despite multiple child disappearances, all of this demonstrates an organization that's expert at managing public perception. FazFest could be their creation, a strategic move to turn negative publicity into positive brand engagement. But the movie never confirms this. We don't see any Fazbear Entertainment representatives at the festival. We don't get exposition about who organized it or how it came to be. FazFest simply exists as a fact of this world, a background element that shapes the story's setting without being fully explained. This is frustrating because understanding FazFest's origins would tell us a lot about what the public knows and how Fazbear Entertainment operates in this universe. There's also the question of whether FazFest will continue after the toy animatronics attack. The festival was interrupted by genuine horror, by real deaths and threats. Will the community take this as a sign that they were wrong to celebrate, that they should respect the tragedy instead of commercializing it? Or will this just become part of the lore, another scary story to tell, making future FazFests even more popular, because now there are more tragic events to mythologize? The movie's cynical edge suggests the latter is more likely. People have short memories. Tragedies become stories, become entertainment. Next year, there might be actors dressed as the toy animatronics at FazFest, reenacting their rampage for crowds who thrill at the simulated danger. The cycle of commodification continues, each new horror eventually becoming just another attraction, another reason to celebrate rather than mourn. FazFest represents one of the movie's most sophisticated mysteries because it's not about lore or timeline or supernatural mechanics. It's about human behavior, about how communities process trauma, about the ethics of horror entertainment. The movie doesn't preach about this. It simply presents FazFest as reality, lets us see how the characters and town interact with it, and trusts us to think about the implications. We're watching a horror movie based on a horror game series based on child murders. We're being entertained by fictional suffering. FazFest is a mirror reflecting our own consumption of horror back at us. The people at the festival aren't so different from the people watching the movie. We're all, in some sense, celebrating at the sight of tragedy, treating real or realistic suffering as entertainment, creating distance through fiction that lets us enjoy being scared. This meta-commentary is powerful precisely because it's not explicitly stated. The movie presents FazFest without judgment, without characters giving speeches about how wrong it is. Charlotte's actions speak for themselves. The contrast between the festival's cheerful atmosphere and the genuine horror that erupts speaks for itself. We're trusted to make the connections, to feel the discomfort, to question our own relationship with horror entertainment. So FazFest remains mysterious, not because we don't understand what it is, a festival celebrating Freddy Fazbear's, but because we don't fully understand what it means. What does it say about this community that they created it? What does it say about us that we find it believable? What does it say about horror as a genre that we can recognize the problematic nature of commodifying tragedy, while simultaneously enjoying media that does exactly that? These questions don't have clear answers, and the movie wisely doesn't try to provide them. FazFest exists, it shapes the story, and it leaves us thinking about our own complicity in turning horror into entertainment. It's a mystery of ethics and society rather than plot and lore, but it's no less significant for that. The festival's unexplained origins and ambiguous meaning make it one of the movie's richest elements for analysis and discussion. Conclusion: the beautiful frustration of unanswered questions. We've spent this long night together exploring the shadows of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie, examining each mysterious element, each unexplained Easter egg, each tantalizing reference that refuses to resolve into clear understanding. From Shadow Bonnie's fleeting appearance to Circus Baby's green eyes, from Charlotte's inexplicable connection to the marionette to the contents of Afton's trophy box, from Michael's sudden existence to the arcade game's impossible presence, from Sister Location's shadowy references to Charlotte's unexplained powers, from the social commentary of FazFest to the post-credits teasers of conflicts yet to come. We've catalogued mysteries upon mysteries, questions stacked on questions, a tower of unexplained elements reaching toward answers we can glimpse but can't quite grasp. What makes this exploration both challenging and rewarding is recognizing the difference between what the movie confirms and what remains in the realm of fan theory. The confirmed facts are solid ground. Shadow Bonnie appears in the hallway, visible for just a few frames. Circus Baby has green eyes when we see her in Vanessa's dream. Charlotte states she feels connected to the marionette before her death. The trophy box contains Garrett's plane, marbles, a mirror, and a notebook. Michael Afton works at the pizzeria and facilitates the spectral scooper's entry. The arcade cabinets show Pop Goes Adventure, Candy Fishing, and FNaF World. The license plate reads ICDDP, Mini Marionettes Attack in the Underground Sections. A ballerina figure spins in Vanessa's music box. The toy animatronics coordinate their attacks during FazFest. Springtrap's eyes flicker to life in the post-credits scene. Henry leaves a warning message for Mike. These are the observable facts, the elements we can point to and say with certainty, this happened in the movie. but surrounding each confirmed detail are layers of interpretation, attempts by the community to understand what these elements mean, how they connect to established lore, and what they might reveal about this cinematic universe's rules and history. The challenge and the beauty of Five Nights at Freddy's storytelling is that it invites this kind of deep engagement while resisting easy answers. Consider how the movie handles Charlotte's mysterious pre-death connection to the marionette. The film establishes this as fact through dialogue, but it never explains it. Was this spiritual destiny, psychological projection, or something else? The movie trusts viewers to develop their own interpretations based on what they know about Henry's role as creator, Charlotte's personality, and the marionette's later protective function. Different viewers will reach different conclusions, and the movie doesn't privilege one interpretation over another. This ambiguity isn't a flaw in the storytelling. It's an invitation to engage, to think, to discuss with other fans who might see things differently. The same principle applies to nearly every mystery we've explored tonight. Circus Baby's green eyes are visible on screen, but what they mean requires interpretation. In the games, green eyes indicate Elizabeth's possession after her death. But Elizabeth isn't mentioned in this movie, and Vanessa occupies the daughter role. Does this mean Elizabeth exists in this universe but hasn't been introduced yet? Does it mean someone else possesses Circus Baby? Does it mean the movie is using green eyes for different symbolic purposes? Each interpretation has merit, but none can be confirmed until future films provide additional context. This is the brilliance of Scott Cawthon's approach to storytelling within this franchise. He provides puzzle pieces without showing us the completed picture. He trusts his audience to be smart enough, engaged enough, and passionate enough to work together assembling those pieces, debating how they fit, and revising theories as new information becomes available. The Five Nights at Freddy's community has spent over a decade doing exactly this, building elaborate theories about timeline placements, character identities, and supernatural mechanics. The movies continue this tradition, giving us new pieces to work with while maintaining the fundamental mystery that makes the franchise compelling. What's particularly interesting about the FNaF 2 movie is how it balances service to longtime fans with accessibility for newcomers. Someone who's never played the games can watch this movie and follow the basic story. Charlotte's vengeful spirit is causing chaos, and our heroes must stop her. The supernatural possession, the animatronic attacks, and the family drama all work on a surface level without requiring deep lore knowledge. But for fans who've spent years analyzing every detail of the games, every frame of this movie contains additional layers of meaning, references that reward expertise, and mysteries that connect to larger questions about the franchise. The unexplained elements we've discussed tonight serve both audiences. Casual viewers might not notice Shadow Bonnie's brief appearance or recognize Circus Baby in the background, and that's fine. The movie works without catching these details. But for dedicated fans, these moments are gifts, acknowledgements that Scott and Emma Tammy understand who's watching most carefully, who'll pause frames and compare notes online, who'll debate theories until the next film arrives with new information. This dual-layer approach to storytelling does mean that some mysteries might never receive explicit answers. Not every Easter egg needs explanation. Not every reference needs to connect to a larger plot point. Sometimes a Shadow Bonnie appears simply to acknowledge that yes, this entity exists in the cinematic universe, even if we're not ready to explore what it means or where it comes from. Sometimes Circus Baby has green eyes to signal to knowledgeable fans that Elizabeth's story happened in some form, even if we're not going to see that story depicted on screen. Part of being a Five Nights at Freddy's fan is accepting this uncertainty, embracing the ambiguity, and finding satisfaction in the process of theorizing, rather than demanding concrete resolution for every question. The community thrives on debate, on different interpretations, on the ongoing conversation about what it all means. If Scott provided definitive answers to every mystery, if the movies explained every reference and connection, something valuable would be lost. The collaborative discovery process, the shared experience of piecing things together, is as important to the franchise's appeal as the horror and story themselves. Looking at the mysteries that we've explored tonight, some will likely find answers in future films. The third movie will presumably explain more about Springtrap and William's return. We might learn additional details about Henry's history with William and the marionette's creation. Michael's motivations could be revealed, though they might remain enigmatic. Charlotte's powers might be explored more fully, or they might simply be accepted as part of this universe's rules without detailed explanation. Other mysteries might remain forever ambiguous. We may never get a full account of what's in that notebook from Afton's trophy box. The significance of the marbles and mirror might never be explicitly stated. Shadow Bonnie could remain a fleeting appearance, acknowledged but never fully explained. The arcade games might simply be meta-references without in-universe significance, and that's okay. Not every question needs an answer. Some mysteries are richer for remaining mysterious. What matters is that these unexplained elements give us something to think about, discuss, and return to. They reward careful viewing and deep knowledge of the franchise. They create connection points between the movies and the games without requiring the films to adapt every detail of game lore. They trust the audience to be active participants in constructing meaning rather than passive recipients of information. As we close out this exploration, I want to acknowledge that the analysis we've done tonight represents one perspective among many possible interpretations. Other fans will emphasize different details, draw different connections, and reach different conclusions about what these mysteries mean. That diversity of perspective strengthens the community rather than weakening it. Every theory contributes to our collective understanding. Even theories that ultimately prove incorrect help us sharpen our thinking and consider angles we might have missed. The Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie gave us a story filled with horror and heart, with spectacle and subtlety, with answers to some questions and intriguing new mysteries to replace them. It confirmed that yes, this cinematic universe will explore its own version of the franchise's lore, rather than simply adapting the games directly. It demonstrated that Scott Cawthon's approach to storytelling, layered with hidden meaning and resistant to simple explanation, translates effectively to film. And it left us with exactly what this community loves most: mysteries to solve, details to analyze, and endless possibilities to explore together. For those of you using this analysis as sleep content, letting these mysteries drift through your thoughts as you settle into rest, I hope tonight's exploration gave you interesting things to ponder in that space between waking and dreaming, where connections form and theories develop. For those still wide awake, ready to discuss and debate, I encourage you to share your own interpretations and observations. What did you notice that we didn't cover? Which mystery intrigues you most? What theories have you developed to explain the unexplained? The conversation continues beyond this video, in comment sections and subreddit threads, in Discord servers and YouTube discussions. The Five Nights at Freddy's community is built on this kind of collaborative analysis, on fans sharing observations and working together to understand what we've seen. Your perspective matters. Your theories contribute. Your careful attention to detail helps everyone see things they might have missed. As we wait for the third film to arrive and potentially answer some of these questions, while inevitably creating new ones, we can take satisfaction in knowing that the mysteries themselves have value. The unanswered questions, the unexplained Easter eggs, the details that resist easy interpretation, these are features, not bugs. They're what keep us engaged, what bring us back, what make Five Nights at Freddy's more than just a horror franchise about haunted animatronics. So rest well tonight, whether you're drifting off to sleep with theories forming in your subconscious, or staying awake to dive deeper into analysis and discussion. The mysteries remain patient and persistent, waiting for us to decode them or simply to appreciate their enigmatic presence in the shadowed corners of this cinematic universe. We're all in this together, searching for understanding in the darkness, finding meaning in mysteries, and loving every unanswered question along the way. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unexplained elements of the FNaF 2 movie, please like this video and subscribe to Night Mode Lore for more thoughtful, atmospheric explorations of the franchise's endless mysteries. Let me know in the comments which mystery fascinated you most, what theories you've developed, or what details you noticed that we didn't cover tonight. Your engagement helps this community thrive and helps create the kind of collaborative discovery that makes Five Nights at Freddy's special. Until next time, sleep well, theorize often, and never stop looking for the details others miss. The shadows hold secrets, and together we'll find them.